Dream, 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 dream. Dream, dream, dream when I want you. In my arms when I want you. And all your charms whenever I want you. All I have to do is dream, 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 dream.
Fluttershy landed in front of her cottage and headed inside. Angel hopped up to greet her in his typical annoyed way when she opened the door. It was later than he expected her, and he was hungry. What did she expect him to do? Fix himself a sandwich. He tapped his foot impatiently and gestured to his wrist as if he were wearing a watch. I know you must be hungry, Angel. Twilight needed to talk to me about some things. About our friends. Angel's irritation faded into guilt when she mentioned them. Maybe this one time he should stop being so demanding. He had seen how Fluttershy was the last couple nights. Even though it took her hours to finally fall asleep, he could hear her from her bedroom upstairs bawling late into the night. At first, it aggravated him. He was trying to sleep himself, you know. But as the first night, the night after Pinky died, started becoming morning, he started to feel bad for her. He knew she was a bit timid and could be over-emotional about some things, but they never lasted literally all night long before. She told him the next day about what happened to Pinky and, for what must have been the first time since she started taking care of him, he was sympathetic. The other animals that stayed in her cottage with her had gone through similar emotional roller coasters over the last few days. Her crying was keeping them up during the nights as well, so they vacated their homes for quieter surroundings until Fluttershy had calmed down a bit. She headed to the kitchen and threw together a nice salad for Angel. He could see that she was still feeling awful and was pleasantly surprised when she didn't take the easy way out of his late dinner and just give him some pellets. She made a small salad for herself and slowly poked at it. I don't understand it, Angel. All these terrible things that have been happening lately. Now there's only Twilight, Rainbow Dash, and me left, she said, beginning to cry. I don't know what to do. She laid down on her couch and buried her head in a pillow. Angel hopped up and gently rubbed her leg, trying to comfort her, but tonight seemed to be going in the same direction the last few nights were. The bunny sighed and hopped to the door. He took one last look at the sobbing mare before heading out to sleep in his little outdoor house. Fluttershy had fallen asleep a couple hours later. If she wasn't so fatigued from what she had been dealing with recently, she probably could have stayed up all night again crying. She was sprawled out on her couch, her cheeks matted and stained below her eyes. Her mane was unkempt and her coat unbrushed. A long howl pierced the silence in the air and scared Fluttershy awake. What was that? Almost answering her question, another howl echoed in the darkness. She jumped up and locked her windows and drew the curtains, diving under the couch when she was done. Don't worry, Fluttershy. There's nothing to be afraid of. A voice said from one of the animal homes overhead. Who's there? A pink head with two large front teeth and a flat mane popped out of one of the little squirrel enclosures and looked at the frightened pony. Squirrel Pinky skittered down the little staircase built specially for its occupants and stopped in front of the couch. Fluttershy stuck her head out and smiled. Oh, Pinky, is that really you? You look different. Of course it's me. What do you think? She spun around, showing herself off. The Pegasus crawled out from under the sofa and gave the pink squirrel a big hug. Oh my gosh, you're so cute. Pinky slipped out from her grip. Hey Fluttershy, have you ever wondered what it'd be like to be one of your little critters? I can tell you, it's kinda fun. Oh, yes, Pinky. I can imagine how nice it is to be able to run around free like they do and not have any worries in the world, Fluttershy sighed heavily, happily fantasizing. Well, come on. Let's go. Pinky cheered, jumping onto Fluttershy's head and ruffling her mane in front of her eyes. She pulled the hair from in front of her face and she was in a large, beautiful meadow, the sun shining, the flowers fragrant. Birds flew overhead and sang their happy songs. Fluttershy looked at her hoofs and saw they had been replaced with fuzzy little white feet. She looked over the rest of her body and grinned ecstatically. She had traded her wings for a fluffy, cotton tail and long floppy ears. Her long pink mane still remained. She ran her feet over her white, fuzzy body, just to see if this were real. The pink squirrel dashed past her and she gave chase after her friend, laughing as they jumped around and rolled through the grass. Pinky ran around and around Bunny until she fell over dizzy. She giggled uncontrollably and sat back up, searching for where the squirrel went. Something was off though. She wasn't in the meadow anymore. It was much darker, and trees and bushes were scattered in her line of sight. She looked up and saw the sun barely peeking through the overgrowth. It almost looked like she was in. She gulped nervously, Pinky. Where'd you go? She hopped along slowly, trying not to make a sound. A bush in front of her rustled and shook slightly. Pinky. Please tell me that's you, she whispered. A timberwolf jumped out in front of her and glared at its next meal. Bunny, she shrieked and ran away as fast as her tiny feet would carry her. She ducked between the foliage, using her agility and small stature to outmaneuver the hungry beast. It was still on her tail though. The noise she was making and her heavy gasps for breath as she tried to escape made her easy to keep up with. She came into a clearing and saw a small hole under a rock. She made a beeline for it as the timberwolf jumped out behind her and spotted her running for what she hoped would be safety. Bunny, she jammed her upper body into the hole and scraped the ground with her hind legs. Just as the timberwolf clamped its jaws shut, she forced herself into the burrow completely. The wolf growled and clawed at the dirt around the opening. Bunny, she turned around and plopped onto her butt, grabbing her chest as she caught her breath. She suddenly felt it tickling on her back. She spun around in her cramped quarters. Her eyes adjusted to the darkness and she saw a snake flicking its tongue at her, wondering who this home invader was. She crawled backwards and a claw scratched into her back. The wolf buried its snout in the hole and grabbed her by the tail, dragging her out and tossing her like a rag doll. She looked up at the predator as it bared its teeth and drooled in anticipation to its fluffy meal. She screamed as its mouth opened and barreled down on her. Fluttershy snapped awake on her couch, covered in sweat. Her heart was racing and she was gasping for breath. She remembered what had been upon her a moment ago and looked at her back. Nothing. She hung her head, trying to calm down and stop herself from throwing up. She went into the kitchen and turned on the sink to splash some water in her face and get the sweat out of her eyes. After cleaning herself up, she walked over to the mirror by her door to check her appearance. She still looked pretty scared, but the feeling was slowly passing. It was just a terrible dream, right? She sighed and laid her head on the mirror for a moment. She jumped in fright when she looked up at the mirror again. Pinky was staring back at her with a disturbing grin. She looked behind and came nose to nose with the pink pony gazing right at her. The Pegasus jumped again. Hi, Fluttershy. You look upset. What's wrong? Pinky asked with a frozen smile. Oh, Pinky, it was terrible. I was a bunny and we were playing and I got lost and... Aw, I'm sorry. You know what? You could use a pick-me-up, and I know just what'll make you feel better. What's that? Pinky put her hoofs on Fluttershy's shoulders. I'm gonna make you some chocolate. The yellow mare looked away awkwardly. That's nice of you, Pinky, but I'm not really in the mood for chocolate right now. I'll still make you some chocolate, okay? Realizing she wasn't going to win an argument against Pinkie Pie over anything sweet, she sighed defeatedly, all right. I guess I can have some later or something. That's the spirit. Pinkie cheered. Fluttershy smiled at her friend, who hadn't let go yet. They stood there looking at each other for a moment silently. The yellow Pegasus frowned and cocked an eyebrow. Pinkie. I thought you said you were going to make me some chocolate now. Pinkie giggled, I did, silly. Fluttershy continued to stare at her friend. You haven't moved though. I know. The timid mare was getting a little annoyed by Pinkie's game, glaring in irritation. Well, if you want some help, we can go. She tried to point to the kitchen, but suddenly couldn't move. She struggled against her unresponsive limbs, grunting as she tried to force something to give. Pinkie. What's going on? Tisk, I told you. I made you some chocolate. She turned Fluttershy around to face her reflection and she started to panic. The Pegasus had somehow become a delicious chocolate bunny. She whined and whimpered as she tried desperately to move. You know what you remind me of, Fluttershy? Pinkie asked the reflection. The Spring Harvest Festival. It's my second favorite holiday right behind Nightmare Night. All that candy. Oh yeah. Pinkie licked her lips. Can you guess the best part about Spring Harvest Festival? Of course you can. The chocolate bunnies. It's always so much fun when you bite their little ears off. Fluttershy screamed as Pinkie lifted her chocolate body into her mouth and bit down on her bunny ears. She laid on the couch yelling at the top of her lungs. Her ears suddenly broke off, bitten all the way through the bone. Jagged teeth marks remained. Blood poured from the wounds and covered her face. Pinkie looked at the terrified bunny-shaped treat as she indulged her sweet tooth. Even in the dream, the thick red ooze dripped from where her ears just were. Ooh, cherry filling. She continued chewing and crunched down on something, gasping in delight. And nuts too. Mmm. Delicious. But we're not done yet, Fluttershy. I still have to bite the head off. No. She shrieked as Pinkie chomped down on her chocolatey neck. Fluttershy's head rolled onto the floor, severed from her body, leaving spots of blood when it bounced. It came to a stop and a red pool collected where it laid. Every few seconds, new bite wounds appeared on her legs, her chest, her stomach, having broken through from one side of her to the other.